Hello, my name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I'm speaking with Barry saxophone player Lauren Sevian, really one of the top players in her craft of baritone saxophone and one of the top female jazz musicians. She's won many awards, and she's really knowledgeable. She's a great educator as well, and she's really one of the top stars on saxophone. So thanks for watching this interview. Please subscribe, share it with your friends, hit the like button, and stay tuned because we have a lot more future interviews coming.
So ladies and gentlemen, today I'm speaking with a great baritone saxophonist, Lauren Sevian, really one of the top musicians in her craft of baritone saxophone, and a Grammy Award-winning artist, great inspiration for female jazz musicians as well as all musicians on the saxophone. And yes, we have run into each other a few times over the years. We were talking about Charles Gould's old apartment when you lived in the Bronx, of that place. So let's talk about your early background and where you're from initially.
Yeah, so I'm from a small town in Long Island called Miller Place. And I first started playing music when my mom plays piano, classical piano, and really, for fun. And she started teaching me when I was maybe like 5 years old, because I definitely, was interested in it. And I just grew up around music. My father had played violin. My older brother is a saxophonist and also plays, a myriad of instruments, drums, bass, guitar, But when I saw him playing the saxophone and I was 8 years old, that's when I I saw that and I said, I want to play that, And then I started getting into the saxophone and taking lessons. I mean, my parents are such, everybody in my family, including my sister, who was a little reluctant. Everyone took music lessons, and saxophone. I started getting into jazz. I was probably, in 6th or 7th grade, and I said to my saxophone teacher, I'm really interested in playing jazz. And he was like, yes. So he made all these tapes for me, compilations of like Charlie Parker and Train and Hank Mobley. And my father had a very extensive jazz collection. So he gave me a bunch of recordings to check out, Miles Davis Kind of Blue and Dave Brubeck Time Out. He absolutely loved Dave Brubeck, and he always talked about how, he and my mother saw him live at Stony Brook University when they were in school. And they also saw Thelonious Monk, So a lot of cats would come through and play the Stoller Center out there. So it was, definitely a supportive environment as far as playing music. And it was basically, if you had to practice, if you wanted to go outside and play, you had to practice first. And they never really had to force me to practice. I just enjoyed doing it. Sometimes piano, at a certain point, I had to be forced to do it, but saxophone, I was always interested, in practicing. And then at a certain point in high school, I started playing the baritone at the suggestion of my instructor, Jeff Lang, who was a baritone player primarily. I mean, he played all the saxophones, but he mostly played baritone. And I was, as you can imagine, just like, what? I don't want to play that thing. It's huge, I'm going to have to carry that around. And he said, I think you really are going to fall in love with it. And he was totally right, because as soon as I started playing the baritone, I didn't even want to look at the alto. I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
I mean,
the baritone is such a unique instrument.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend from William Patterson. He ended up becoming an alto player, but I always encourage him. I said, play the bari, because it's kind of like with the bass, you'll have more opportunities, with that instrument. But yeah, we'll definitely get into that, because you've got to have big lungs to be able to play that. I mean, my first exposure,
it's a different kind of airflow, for sure.
Yeah, well, when I was a young guy, Gary Smulyan came and played, and I was just, wow, how is he playing all that? Like, it's that circular breathing,
Yeah.
But I was talking with Paul Myers, and he's like, oh yeah, I knew Gary back when he played alto, So everybody makes their transition, I suppose, to the instrument through different needs, and
I mean, I loved tenor, and it's funny because like I probably listened to more tenor players at that point, but I didn't really want to play tenor. I think part of it was just when I would play a B flat instrument, it was a little bit difficult for me to deal with that transition because I was so used to playing everything either in E flat or concert. So when I would play a tenor, it was almost like I might as well have been playing a trombone, or something totally different that wasn't a saxophone,
Yeah.
It's funny because I didn't have that issue with clarinet, but with saxophone, I just, like, it really bothered me, But the baritone, I totally, I just fell in love with it, and I was like, okay, sold.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk about having like this musical background in your family and like that kind of drive to, you've got to practice and have lessons. You already started performing professionally by like the age of 12 already, and you end up winning this international Count Basie competition at 17. So talk about that time in your life and getting serious on your instrument,
Yeah, I was pretty active in school and outside of school as far as extracurricular music activities were concerned. I mean, I had such a great all my music instructor. I just was very lucky to go to a school that had great instructors and encouraging and trying to find outside opportunities, So I was playing at, Stony Brook University, for example. I was playing in their jazz ensemble when I was in high school, and it was actually fun because my brother went to school there, so we would like be in the same jazz ensemble, even though he was 5 years older than me. And so it was such a great experience to have that with him, and then to get to play with people who were like so much more experienced than I was. So I learned so much being in that situation. And Todd Kuhlman happened to be the director of the jazz department at that time. So, he would bring people in like John Faddis, and, we would play all of the real stuff, It was really formative for me to be in these kinds of situations, and I think having that playing experience in school and outside of school was really, really helped me get to that next level. And the Count Basie thing was, it was sort of unexpected, I guess. They had this competition, and a bunch of big bands from all over Long Island came and participated, and, it was like a day-long event. They had master classes and things like that. And I wound up winning the award, soloist award, and I was able to perform with the Basie band at the concert that night. I was, I probably had an out of body experience as I was playing because I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, many years later, I wound up doing some playing and some tours with the Basie band, and a lot of the same guys were in that band then, are still in the band.
Yeah.
And a lot of them remembered me. They were like, "Oh, you were playing alto then," and I said, "Yeah, I don't do that anymore." but it was, really down to just the great instructors and education, the educational experience that I had to be, put in those situations. Just very fortunate, Very fortunate.
For a lot of young musicians who become involved and end up going to school and becoming professional musicians, it's really important to have the right situations and the right mentors to get you to fall in love with it. But once you fall in love with it, it's just it's a lifelong thing. It's in your heart, that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So you arrived in Manhattan, to go to Manhattan School of Music in 1997. Mm-hmm. So what was your experience like at Manhattan School of Music, and who were some of your teachers? Did you go out to play?
Yeah, I really enjoyed going to school there. My first year I studied with Joe Temperley and Steve Slagle. And then my second year I studied with Mark Turner and Donnie McCaslin. And same with my third year, studied with Mark and Donnie. And then my last year I studied again with Steve Slagle and did some composition arranging with Micah Benny. So those were all my private instructors. And they all had a very huge influence on me and the way that I approach music and, the way that I think about music. And, it was great working with Steve because later on we got to do some playing together with the Mingus Band, So it was, I guess, when things come full circle, it's kind of interesting. And then I had great classroom instructors, guys like Chris Rosenberg and Ira Gittler, taught many of the history electives and just, met a lot of people there. And everybody there is at such a high level. And I was coming from a very small pond, like a big fish in a small pond. And then I'm at MSM and everybody was way, 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 way better than I was. And at that point I've been playing Barry really for not maybe a year and not quite even full time. So I was still just, not like I'm, we're all still figuring things out on our instrument, obviously. But at that point, I felt like I was just so far behind. So I just had to stay really focused and not get, super overwhelmed that everybody was so much better than I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, usually when you get to a music school, it's like a big wake up call. Everybody's good at their instrument,
It can be really intense and daunting. And I just had to just stay focused and, take control of the things that I could control. And that was the practicing. And I just spent a lot of time, shedding.
Were you also were you going out to any venues at that time, checking things out or concerts?
Yeah, especially my first year, because I was just so excited, obviously, as an 18-year-old to be in New York City for the first time and actually living there. And, I lived in the dorm. So, all of us I'd get a phone call from, a friend of mine, and she was, when Smoke Jazz Club used to be called Augie's, and she would, sometimes she would call me from there. She'd be like, "Lauren, get down here right now. Cecil Payne is playing." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And we lived 5 blocks away from there. We lived on 101st Street and Broadway. That's where the old MSM dorms used to be located. So it was pretty easy to just, run out and go the 5 blocks to Augie's, So I would see, I'd see guys like Cecil Payne playing there, and then cats that were really first coming out in the scene, like Jimmy Green. And, I remember I remember one of the first times I sat in there, and it was with Jimmy Green and John Ellis were playing a 2-tenor gig there. And I walked in and I had my horn and they're like, do you want to play? And I was like, okay. So I was going there a lot just because it was so close. I mean, it was close to where I live, but, you know, cats were there hitting, you know. And I would go to Smalls and probably those two places I would go to the most, you know, Augie's and Smalls and Cleo's a little bit. And then places like Vigioni's was still open, you know, so I go down to the Village and go to like Sweet Basil and the Vanguard and I remember that first year Birdland used to be on like 100, it was on 104th, but then it closed at some point that year, you know, but I remember going in I'm pretty sure that's where it was like on 103 or 104. So I definitely did some hanging for sure my first year. And then I feel like my second year, I barely went out because I just got so into just being in that practice zone.
Yeah,
not that I was, I was still shedding my first year, obviously, but my second and into my third years, I was just like, I don't want any distractions. I don't want to go out. I just want to practice.
well, how'd you balance, like, were you sitting in at all, or were you kind of like holding back because you wanted to perfect yourself before you put yourself out there on the scene?
I mean, a little bit. I probably was my personality is like, because I would come in there and I would usually have my horn with me, because sometimes I would just stop by there. I would walk. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but I would walk back and forth to school sometimes with my Barry. Like that was part of my exercise. Because I didn't really at that point, I wasn't really going to the gym. So I thought, well, if I want to exercise, I could just walk to school with my horn. It's 20 blocks, right? And so sometimes I would walk back and forth like a couple times a day with my horn. So I would be walking back and I would walk by there and look in and, you know, go in there and I'd have my horn. So a lot of the times if, you know, guys saw me with my horn, they would ask me to, you know, like, oh, you want to play? And I would be like, yeah. Even though maybe a few times I probably just should have, like, you know, I'd go up there and, you know, I didn't know a tune, but I thought, like, you know, I have pretty good ears, so I thought, well, I'll just, you know, listen a few times and I'll catch what's happening, you know, and sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't, so it was fun though. But I would do a bit of both. I mean, I think as I got older, I was just more into going and checking out, you know, checking people out as opposed to like trying to sit in with everybody, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, your hard work paid off because, you know, you finish school and, you know, as a baritone saxophonist, I mean, you've been fortunate enough to work with some real great big bands over the years, you know, like the all-female Diva Jazz Orchestra, the Mingus Big Band, McBride Big Band, Dizzy Gillespie All-Star Orchestra, Robin Eubanks Orchestra, I mean, so many. So talk about working with some of these groups and being a successful, versatile baritone saxophonist in a big band setting.
Well, I think, I mean, I always enjoyed playing in the section and playing in big bands, you know, and I would say that, you know, the first gig I really had when I was in school and then out of school, I was subbing with the Diva Jazz Orchestra, you know, and to be in that environment with so many incredibly talented women, you know, that had such strong, unique voices on their instruments is such an inspiration to me, you know. And I had the opportunity to go on this tour with them to Europe, and for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So it was intense because you're in the same environment with these people for a long time, and it taught me so much about life and what it really solidified what I wanted to do, and that was to be a player, You know, I really wanted to be a full-time professional as much as possible, you know, and I feel like having the opportunity to do that tour just showed me that it was possible, you know, not easy, obviously, but it's possible if you're really dedicated. I think also playing in big band situations lends itself to just your network grows exponentially just because there are more people in a big band than say like if you're playing a quartet, and that's great, you know, but if you're playing a big band, you have like at least 14 other people that could possibly recommend you for something, you know.
Yeah.
So that didn't really sort of hit me until later, like, oh, you're just you're it's almost like a numbers game, but I truly enjoy playing in big bands, you know. And having that experience and, you know, being surrounded by these strong women, it made me feel like I could accomplish the goals that I set out for myself, you know. And plus, like, the music is so fun. So and a lot of those women I became very close friends with, and still, you know, we all have such great memories of that tour in particular. Was just you know, most tours can, well, not all tours are fun, but a lot of them are, and that one was particularly fun. So
well, let's talk more, like, we'll talk more about like you being a band leader in your own right, but I think this would be a good segment to talk into being a female musician in jazz. And you know, there's always been that sexism, and it's hard to navigate that. So talk about how you navigated that and some of the challenges, because believe it or not, I've seen some female musicians, like, it was really bad on them, and I saw one that even like killed herself, you know. So I want to talk about this because you're a good like inspiration for young females who want to get into this and do it the right way, you know, because that, unfortunately, that toxic masculinity is still there in the music, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that it's like toxicity is like a great it's a great way to put it. You know, it's there, and how can we fight that? You know, how can we make things? My focus is how can I make things better? You know, for not, obviously not just myself, but for everybody, and do it in a way that, you know, is genuine and maintaining integrity to what I believe in as a musician. And for me, the first thing is everything is always about the music first. You know, the music comes first. That being said, I do feel like more and more I'm seeing, and I'm just in these situations too, where, you know, women, I think we have to really empower one another and be solid in the community with each other, you know, and that involves supporting each other, that involves, you know, playing each other's music, being in each other's bands. And this really started to become very apparent to me probably within the last like 7 to 8 years, you know, how important it was, because I know myself, like at certain points I felt very alone, and that I would, you know, like obviously there are certain gigs that I get called for, but then sometimes I just felt like I would be left out because maybe somebody didn't want to have a female on the gig because it created a, you know, a certain kind of situation, or, you know, maybe because of rooming situations where you could, you know, couldn't have a female roommate, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, all those challenges.
So sometimes like that would be an issue, you know. But I think that the one way as women that we can really, sort of fight this toxic environment is by, sticking together and not trying to, tear each other down. Because I think that was also part of my experience where, I would think that I was cool with somebody, and then, like I would find out that they were like talking about me behind my back, and it's and I I didn't really like see any point to that.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
find
it
this
can be
a lot
very
in jazz,
gossipy.
Yeah, there's a lot
and
of gossip.
it's not just the women. It's everything, and it could be gossipy and catty. But I've certainly been guilty of that myself. I'm not going to say that I'm not perfect by any stretch. But I do feel like there is something very powerful and formative about being in a musical situation with somebody else. Like, for example, I have a band with a friend of mine, Alexa Tarantino, called LSAT, and when we play with one another, there's just something about playing in that situation with her. It's just so like it's so empowering, and I feel like it sets a really good example, especially because someone like Alexa I met when I was teaching at this camp, Litchfield. She's like maybe 13, 14 years younger than I am. So I feel like if we can create situations and create, and she's one of my closest friends too, if we can create situations and create inspirational musical environments for one another, that's one way that we can fight that. And then have it be like, and then the music is killing on top of it,
That's like, that's really important, like, especially like this music is all about relationships, and I see you as somebody who rises above that, rises above the dark stuff that happens, and that's a great role model for people. And in this music, I mean, I've seen it. There's so many people who talk trash about this, and I've seen men talk about women bad, like in the back, like hanging out at like Fat Cat or these session hoes type stuff, and like a lot of times there was like this jealousy type of thing, and that's unfortunate. And then it used to be more like the female musicians were usually vocalists and had their own kind of like, they walked their own path. But now you see there's a lot of young good female musicians coming out. Like, for example, Sasha Berliner on the Vibes, and like Nicole Glover, and all these young musicians who are leading their own groups. So we hope to see that continues in that direction,
Yes.
But yeah, as a band leader, we did talk about working with Alexa Tarantino, but also with we have a lot of great musicians we worked with, like Christian McBride and E.J. Strickland and George Colligan and Boris Kozlov and Jonathan Blake. So talk about a few of your recordings as a leader. Pretty complicated music, some of your original stuff. So
yeah, I have to blame that on my baritone. I'm not responsible. But so my first record, I had Boris and Jonathan Blake and George Colligan. That was for Greg Osby had approached me about doing a record for his label, and at the time I was maybe like 27 or 28, and it was funny because I didn't totally feel ready to do a record. And he said to me, "You're never going to really feel ready. You just need to do it." He said, "You're ready. Just do it." And I felt like, okay, you know, if he said I should do it, then I should probably do it. And it was just so much fun. And I had a lot of music that I had just written over the years. I mean, some of it I wrote specifically for that record date, but a lot of stuff was, you know, just stuff I had kind of had in my binder back here that, you know, I put some finishing touches on. And it was a really, you know, it was a really fun date. And I still, you know, play some of those tunes on my gigs just because I enjoy the music, you know.
Yeah.
And then my second record, which I wound up waiting about 10 years to do my second record. Part of that was maybe a bit intentional. Part of it was just, you know, I kind of was really focused on doing a lot of other stuff musically. Felt like I was doing a lot of gigs, like a lot of sideman stuff, but I wasn't really thinking as much about my projects, you know. And then the time just goes by and you realize, wow, and every year I'd say to myself, okay, I'm going to do it this year. Okay, I'm going to do it this year. And then it just winds up getting like pushed further and further back, you know. And then finally I was like, I have to do this. This is ridiculous. Like 10 years, but that's how it goes sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And I wound up doing it on the Posi-tone label, and the band was Alexa played on a few tracks. So we sort of had the LSAT introduction on that. And it's Robert Rodriguez on piano and Christian McBride on bass and EJ Strickland on drums. And it was a lot of fun, you know. For me, I really enjoy being in the studio. It's just something about the process of it. And especially when everybody's on the same page. I mean, you can certainly be in the studio and it's really contentious and it could turn into a total nightmare, but that was never the case with either one of my sessions. You know, I felt very supported, and it was just a good time, you know, making music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, the music is great, and it's up there on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find your stuff, so anybody watching can try to look it up. And you know, we'll talk more about your time as an educator soon, but let's talk about the awards and stuff. I mean, you won so many awards. You won Grammys and competitions. You're in these polls and the Downbeat and stuff. So what's some of your formula for success? I mean, you're pretty humble, but like, you know, you're showing results compared to a lot of players who are out there. You know, you're winning these things, you know. So
I guess, I mean, some of it is like just being surprised to be acknowledged. I honestly like it's really nice. I feel like, you know, I've put in a lot of time and effort into the music, so it's, you know, it's of course really you know, humbling, and I graciously, you know, accept when I am acknowledged. You know, it's really lovely in that sometimes it can be a nice like reaffirmation of what you're doing, but it's also, you know, it's not the end all be all, but it's something that, you know, when it happens, it's great. And I try to enjoy and savor that as much as possible, and just appreciative to the people that have, you know, recognized my music and my playing. 'Cause ultimately that's, you know, what music is about. You hope that what you have to say as an artist or as a musician moves somebody, you know? And for me, that's why I play music. I mean, obviously I enjoy it for myself and it feels great, you know? And I do feel like most of us, we have this need that we have this need to embrace the connection that we have with our instrument, you know. So when I, you know, would hear, if I, you know, it's just it's nice to be acknowledged, you know. It's really nice.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about now your time as an educator, and we'll talk about Barry Sax. You know, you've been an educator in the universities and schools for many years, and you teach like Manhattan. And so, what's your thoughts on the field of jazz education? And after that, yeah, what's your advice for baritone saxophonists, what they could be working on?
I guess my approach to teaching really is that, I mean, one of the first things I always say to my students is that I can only teach you about what I know, you know, and I'm not going to pretend to try to offer you something that I know nothing about. So when I assign my students things to work on, they're all things that I've personally done, you know, whether it's transcriptions or, you know, certain types of scale or pattern practice. It's everything that I've gone through myself, you know, because that's all that I can really offer them. But I also impress upon them to, you know, find their own voice in the music and find what is appealing to them and figure out what sort of story or landscape they want to create through their music, you know. I think figuring out what your, you know, what your niche is very important, you know, and it doesn't have to just be limited to performance, as we know. I mean, one of my students right now at MSM, like he had, like, I think double, like his, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong in saying this if he watches this interview, but as undergrad he was also doubled as a recording, did like, you know, music technology, you know, so he's very, like, if anything goes wrong on Zoom, like, I can rely on him to figure it out. I'm getting better with technology, but it's, you know, it's something I'm working on. I always say it's great to have, you know, have a command of the performance aspect, but, you know, is there anything else music related that appeals to you, whether it's education, whether it's music therapy, whether it's, you know, are you somebody that enjoys writing, you know, composing, or coming up with books, you know. I think it's good to be as versatile as possible, you know.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this a little before the interview, but let's talk about the other aspects of life. Like, you know, you're talking about being a runner and you're in good shape and you're doing that, and you recently remarried and you seem to be, you have the whole picture together. So talk a little bit about like your other aspects of life, because music isn't the only thing in someone's career. Usually there's usually other interests and other things. So talk about that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think sometimes as musicians we get so you know, focused and zoned in on just talking about music that we forget that we have other sides to us, you know. And while I do have a great love for music and the baritone saxophone, I also, I'm somebody that's very, I care a lot about my physical well-being, because I feel like if I'm in a good place physically, my mental health and well-being really, you know, falls into place. So for me, I always try to start my day off like, well, actually right now I'm learning Spanish, so I start my day off with my Spanish lesson. But I'm somebody that has been a practitioner of yoga for many years. It was actually Donnie McCaslin who had initially introduced it to me while I was studying with him, because I was having a lot of back issues, and you know, at the time we had VHS tapes, and I still probably have this tape, but he gave me this VHS tape of this yoga, you know, this yoga instructor. And
it was like Rodney Yee or something, right?
No, it was this lady, and she had this show on PBS. Her name's like Lilius something, but I just thought it was so. I'm like, does Donnie McCaslin do this yoga with this lady doing, like, this is so interesting, you know? But it just showed me, like, okay, there's somebody like Donnie, you know, he's like, you need to do something else besides music, right? And you have to do stuff to keep yourself like centered and healthy. So I was practicing yoga I've been practicing yoga for many years. And then several years ago, a friend of mine had gotten me really into running, and I used to hate running. I never, like, I'm more of a, like, I like playing sports. Like, I like playing tennis and being active and I would do everything that I could besides running. And then it became this thing where, you know, even now still, it's like there are moments during the run where you just want to stop. And it's such a great metaphor for life that, you know, okay, can I make it to this next, like, say, stop sign? And if I make it to that stop sign, let me see how good I feel. If I feel really horrible, then okay, I'll stop, I'll walk, I'll stretch, you know, but I'm not going to give up, you know. Usually I'll set a goal for myself, whether it's time or distance, you know, and as I've gotten older, like, I've had some injuries and stuff, and I've gone through times where I wasn't able to run, so I'm pretty careful about, like, how much I push myself. But you know, in general, I feel like if I can accomplish, you know, a goal that I have, say, on a run or a workout, then again, that's a metaphor for a goal I'm trying to accomplish in life or music, you know. And I think it's good to have, you know, things like that just sort of balance you out, you know. I guess I think what most of us are trying to achieve is balance in our lives, and especially, like, with how things are in the world right now, you know, being kind to ourselves too is important, you know, being trying to show compassion towards yourself is important.
You know, that motto, I say this motto because it's like, you know, sometimes affirmations to yourself, but, you know, health is wealth, you know. It's your body is your vessel. I've seen this with, like, there's so many of these bass musicians who are actually, like, vegetarians and, like, really healthy and live a long time. And then there's, like, some guys who are doing biking. I do biking, like, these long distance biking.
Yeah.
Even guys, like, people wouldn't realize this, but Ron Carter would share this with me when I studied with him. He's like, yeah, I get up at like 4 a.m. with a trainer, like 5 times a week. And even if I play a gig, I get up, you know, like, that's like, it's that drive and that push, and developing that is a part of, like, music. You see this with many of these great musicians. To get to that level, to get to a certain level of virtuosity, you've got to put that time in on your instrument and that discipline, you know. So, but, you know, I've seen examples of you playing, and you're quite there, you know, and you're on the way, you know, on the baritone. And we're just really pleased to speak with you and share this with some of the younger generation. Really would like to get more female musicians interested in jazz. It's important, you know. You can't just have it be an all male toxic brotherhood. No, it's got to be, like, a very inclusive, you know. It's got because you know, it's a great art form. We want to keep it going for a long time to come, you know. But, you know, you spoke about being an educator at Litchfield. You know, I did attend Litchfield many years ago, and you know, it's a great camp. And you know, I suspect you know, you're doing a lot of virtual stuff with this coronavirus epidemic. How are you coping with that as a musician? Because everybody's coping in their own way, with the
Yeah.
coronavirus.
I mean, I'm always happy to like do what I'm asked to do, and it's certainly for me, I wish I could be in more of the physical sphere with people because, music is all about energy, and sometimes it's hard to read people's energy over the internet. You do what you can. But it's also been, it's been a learning experience for me. And I try to put myself in situations that will help me grow, and sometimes uncomfortable situations, like I did a Mingus broadcast where I was just playing solo saxophone, and taking questions, and they had one of the people that works for the jazz workshop as part of was helping facilitate things, as far as the Q&A and stuff goes. But I mean, there's nothing quite like playing solo saxophone to a computer, and you could see people, you could see like numbers statistically wise, like who's watching, but it's just kind of, it's kind of interesting, But I've had some fun. Yeah, I have to say, like I've had some really fun. Like we're getting to do this interview, which is a lot of fun, and I've done some other interviews or talks and taught at camps. I'm doing all my lessons virtually right now, unless we can be outside and be socially distanced. I did actually a student that she goes to school with William Patterson, but she's taken a few lessons with me, and we did like an outdoor kind of jam session with a friend of hers, and that was fun. So I've done things like that, but all the virtual stuff, like actually this I'm doing something with Amanda Monaco this Sunday where we're rebroadcasting a performance because I play in her quartet, and we have a concert series coming up, and this Sunday is the first one, and it's going to be her band, so we had taped it, done the taping, and they're going to rebroadcast it and take questions and talk about it. So I mean, it's ushered in this really huge wave of everybody suddenly transitioning to this new platform. And while I think a lot of us we're ready to get back to in-person playing, we're not quite there yet because of, the pandemic, obviously.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, I've adjusted the best that I can. I mean, in a way, it actually, I got my little setup together here, which I think if the pandemic hadn't happened, I'd still be talking about, I got to get an interface, I got to get a microphone, I got to do this, I got to get, and the pandemic forced me to get all this stuff, right? So, in that way, it's good because, we all had a lot of time to do that.
Yeah, things are certainly moving in that direction. They're changing. I was just talking with Orrin Evans, and I just read an article. Zoom is they're going to be starting to make ticketed shows and charging and stuff.
Oh, okay.
I'd really like to I'm going to be doing this. I got to get this together. It could be my life project because I want to make a website for music venues to do their streams and have like all the things, but I want it to be accessible through like TV and stuff, like, Netflix type stuff on a subscription model. And the technology is already almost pretty much there for that, but it's more of the legal hurdles with playing music and the
licensing and everything,
and all that. But I thought of something, before we finish up. I thought of something, as a saxophonist, were you ever inspired by The Simpsons with Lisa playing saxophone? Because there's all those analogies to Sonny Rollins.
Well, she, and she played the baritone, and
Yep.
It's funny, I didn't really equate it until somebody, when I had said and it's funny because I did watch The Simpsons growing up, but I didn't realize that, I didn't watch enough to realize that she played baritone, she was specifically played baritone. And when I would tell, I forget who said this to me, but I would said like, oh, I play baritone saxophone. They're like, oh, like Lisa Simpson, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah, like her. And my middle name happens to be Lisa, so maybe, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it was meant to be.
I wish, I suppose if I was a young kid, I don't think I ever saw like somebody playing the bass on a cartoon. It's interesting.
Well, I didn't make the connection until I was like much older. But it was just kind of funny.
One exposure I did have, like when we're talking along cartoons, I did get exposed to little jazz through like Hey Arnold, that TV show in the 90s, because it had a lot of those jazz licks in it.
True, yeah.
But so any like future recording projects coming up, or you kind of what's on the horizon?
It's stuff that's sort of in the planning stages. Like Alexa and I are definitely going to do another. We're going to definitely we'd like to do a LSAT record, and I think we're trying to figure it out. We really wanted to do a live record, but we don't want to wait like too long to do it. So we have to just see how things pan out in the next several months. And hopefully start planning another Lioness record. Lioness is another collective that is a all-female collective with myself, Amanda Monaco, the guitarist, Alexa Tarantino, Jenny Hill on tenor, Kiko Saruga on organ, and Sylvia Cuenca on drums. And we're going to do a taping similar in the same concert series that I'm doing with Amanda this Sunday through Flushing Town Hall. We're going to do that in December. But we're also talking about, in the process of planning like a possible the next record, because that record came out maybe last year, so Amanda and I have been talking about it, and like it's a collective, but Amanda and I have really become like the de facto leaders. So we're thinking about, okay, let's do, maybe another Lioness recording, start planning for it. And then another project that I'm involved with is with this alto saxophonist, Purim Jin. And we're supposed to do a recording at some point, and it's gonna be like the front line is all female, like kind of like a super sax format, and we had talked about maybe going into the studio in December, but could be also next year. So those are a few a few irons in the fire. And then I'm also thinking about, I want to do another quartet recording. So I have to just figure out what's first.
Yeah, that'll be great. And people can find your music as we sell on YouTube, and your website is that laurensevian.com.
Yep,
right?
laurensevian.com. And I have links to all the recordings and some videos and
on Facebook you have a pseudonym name, right?
Well, I do. Yeah, I do have a Lauren Sevian page, but my it was funny because like there was a time where I went off Facebook and then I came back as El Boogie, and I was wearing like, I don't know, I have a little bit of a funny side to me, like to sometimes do prankish type stuff, and for the longest time my profile picture was a picture of me wearing sunglasses and a sombrero, and I would friend people that were my actual friends and see if they would respond, and if they didn't, I would vibe them, like, why didn't you accept my friend request? And they would say, what do you mean, like, what are you talking about? And I said, El Boogie, and he said, wait, what? That was you? And then when I got married, my husband's last name is Wright, so I changed it to El Boogie Wright. So
Yeah.
Kind of a fun, a fun transition there. But yeah, that's my pseudonym, my nickname.
Yeah, that's great. Especially in these days and ages, like, for me with with my YouTube channel and such, I have to keep my name because it's like, part of the channel. But with everything that's gone on the social media aspect, with like the social dilemma and all that stuff, I can definitely see like the appeal in having a different name on Facebook. You don't need someone to see all your business,
Yeah, it's funny because it started off as like kind of a joke, and then it just wound up being my regular profile. I mean, I still have like a Lauren Sevian page.
Yeah.
I have a few pages on Facebook. There's like an LSAT one. There's a Lioness one, but. Yeah, the El Boogie one is like kind of my friend, my friend page. So
Great. Okay, so thanks for speaking with us, and hope to see you on the scene again soon.
Yes, I hope so too. Hopefully we'll get through all this. We will.